thank you very much for those of you that are attending, taking time out of your Monday morning. My name is Ryan. I'm one of the onboarding managers in the UK team here. I've been at Leadoo for almost 4 years, onboarding many new clients as they've come through in the UK. And so just to kind of, I realize I might be telling you some stuff you already know, but the onboarding project is obviously very much focused around getting the initial bot solution up and running. So I do a fair bit of bot building, and then helping with the technical implementation, getting the bots on the site, setting up integrations to make sure that leads are managed. And so today I'll be speaking more about those things, primarily bot building. And then we have Gavin, who is a technical account manager, working in the customer success team. So the account management teams, if you like, are in kind of pods of two, with an account manager and a technical account manager. So Gavin is more on the technical side, but he does quite a lot of analysis of bot performance, looking at the data and insights that we gather, from like a really kind of granular level in the bots all the way up to, you know, like the company ID piece and looking at how visitors are behaving on the site. So Gav's quite involved in doing that analysis, in preparation for account management calls where you go through the full solution and obviously look for any opportunities to kind of optimize what we've got set up. So Gav will talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A as well. So again, forgive me if there's anything that you see today that you're already well aware of. Obviously, we do have quite a lot of people signed up who are going to be checking out the recording afterwards as well. So we just want to kind of do an overview of the platform and zoom in on a couple of bits to give some details, in the hope that whoever it is may be able to get the most out of the platform when they're using it. Any immediate questions? Lovely. Okay, so this is the main dashboard page of Leadoo. So this is obviously just a demo account, which allows us to have a bunch of figures here so that everything isn't blank because it's brand new. On this dashboard page, you get kind of a high-level overview of the bot performance and some of the other insights, which Gavin will talk in more detail on later in the call. Each of the kind of widgets, if we can call them that, on the dashboard, I think are fairly self-explanatory. You've got the top 5 most converting bots, an overview of bot triggers, discussions, and leads. So how many people are seeing the bots, how many are having a discussion, and how many are converting, and obviously trying to keep those ratios healthy at all times. Then we've got performance over time. So this is, again, you can see leads, discussions, and triggers, and just sort of see what that looks like based on your website traffic over time, on a day-to-day basis. Top 5 most converting pages, which is different to the top 5 bots, basically because the chat bots are often global throughout an entire site, or you might have 1 or 2 in-page bots or visual bots that you're using in multiple places. So then you need to know which page is where people are converting the most as well. This is just like a little view of the kind of ratio of trigger to discussion and trigger to lead. Obviously, you want to keep them looking at that at all times if you can. Source insights. So this is just like a high-level snippet, but Gavin will show you more later on. This is a way of seeing the source of visitors to the site at multiple points through their journey, up to and including the point of conversion. So instead of it just being that kind of last source attribution, this allows you to see where they came from the first time they visited, where they came from a mid-touch point, and then where they came from on the day that they converted. So this is really useful, obviously, to know, to see kind of real-world tangible results of all of the marketing efforts and campaigns that you're doing, especially anything that you're spending money on. And then journey insights, fairly self-explanatory, of course. We're just looking at the number of days as the average time to conversion, average number of touch points, and average number of page visits, because we know that visitors don't tend to just arrive on the site the first time ever and convert. And then this bit at the bottom is linked to the company ID, which I don't think we've got activated for the demo account. But what that is trying to identify passive B2B visitors on a site using their IP address matching that up to publicly available information and pulling together profiles on companies that are coming to the site. So this kind of moves a little bit more towards supporting outbound sales efforts. It could be a really useful tool if you're making the most of it and keeping an eye on who's visiting, but not necessarily yet converted. So I'll skip now to the conversion kit, which is our collective name for the different types of bots. And if you hover over this, you can see in-page, chatbot, and visual bot, and then a CTA bot. So those are the 4 types of bots, and the top 3 are the most common ones that we use. So the CTA bot, just to cover it quickly, is like when you have a little kind of tab on the side of the screen that just pops out into a mini form. So that's why it's called that. It's just a quick call to action. But the chatbot and in-page bots and the visual bots are obviously a lot more interactive. The top 2 are very much conversation-led, and we can build, kind of as complex as required structures to these bots to help people find the right content at the right time, nudge them along to the point of converting, and also, wherever possible, trying to give multiple different options in terms of ways to convert. So to take some generic examples, it can be fairly common to come across a website and, maybe the only thing to do is book a demo. But we know that because buyers are visiting the site at multiple points throughout their journey, they might not necessarily be ready yet to speak to a salesperson, which essentially is what we know that means. They might be doing earlier research. And so it's very common practice for us to try and work in some more options in the bots for what I would refer to as softer conversions, to try like things like gated content or even newsletter signups or, brochures, white papers, valuable things that visitors can take away earlier in their buying journey, that, give them something useful and help them to remember your name, but also hopefully as much as possible get you at least an email address and a lead that you can nurture and move along in your own campaigns. So the bot builder looks broadly the same regardless of the type of bot across those top 3. Chatbots and in-page bots can essentially be completely interchangeable because they both have the conversational chat style UI. So I'll just jump onto our website quickly to include a visual example here for anyone that's really not familiar yet. Chatbot is your bottom right corner. So it's quite a familiar user experience now. There are many different providers out there. An in-page bot is this chat style UI, but embedded within the page. So these are really useful for putting on key product pages, key service pages, where you can kind of assume higher intent because a visitor has made it further into the site. They're in the right place. The content of this bot should be contextually relevant to the page that it's on, so that you can try and kind of continue the conversation, continue their journey, but have that opportunity to convert them or at least get them some useful resources. And then the visual bot, I think there's one a bit further down. Here we go. So the visual bot is not the chat style UI. This is, clickable kind of tiles or buttons that move through quite quickly. So when you're putting together the content for a bot like this, it is less conversational. It's more gamified, if you like. The idea is that every step has some sort of like tappable answer or option. So these can be really useful for anything from like a simple form replacement. If you know that when you're converting leads, you need to gather quite a bit of information. We know that kind of long static forms can be really daunting and can cause drop off by themselves. The visual bots can help to kind of break up the way that we gather the information, and the completion rates through a visual bot like that tend to be quite high. So you can use it for fairly straightforward form replacement, but you can also use it for kind of signposting and site navigation to get people to key content, key pages, to find the information that they're looking for. Again, each step, maybe not every single step, but in the right places, steps where you take that opportunity to see if you can convert as well. So they're not just navigating the site through the menu bar. They're giving us a little bit of information, and then we're offering options, which could be to go here and find this content, or speak to a friendly expert. So, as I say, chatbots and in-page bots, when you're building them, are kind of interchangeable because they're both the conversational style UI. You could copy an entire chatbot and save it as an in-page bot. and it will basically be ready to go. The visual bots just have, they have the kind of like the sort of heading and then the subtext. So there's just a couple of minor differences there. You can also have images or icons in each of these like buttons and tiles. So there's a little bit more styling you can do visually. But other than that, the kind of functionality of each of the different steps in the bot is still the same. So if we go to build a new bot and build from scratch, this is what you get, which for some people is very scary because you're just starting from scratch. I think because I've been doing it a long time, I think, it's fairly easy for me to get started with a bot in the first place. But just as like a general rule of thumb, if you were going to create like a global chat bot, remember what I'd said about trying to offer people some slightly different options, trying to meet people where they are on their journey. A chatbot typically is global throughout the site. So typically the options in a chatbot are casting the widest net, right? We're not putting an embedded bot on a key page where we can assume high intent later in the journey. So as opening options, you're probably going to want to include, oh, we've got a new visitor. There you go. So as opening options, you're probably going to want to include whatever your main CTA is. So let's just say it is book a demo. But then you want to think about what are the other kind of reasons that somebody might be at a site through the lens of that buying journey, right? So we don't need to worry about people who found their way to the site and they're in the complete wrong place. Of course, they're going to bounce, and that's not the traffic you want anyway. But we want to put some other options in here which are going to capture people's attention and hopefully get them into the conversation. So it could be so just zoom right in so that's really clear. So this could be like a kind of a standard generic starting point for a chatbot, right? You've got high intent ready to go. So this could be someone's later visit. They may have been to the site plenty of times and they're ready to get in touch and book that demo now, whatever that CTA may be. How will this help my business? Obviously kind of implies much further back in their journey. It's kind of early research. They need to understand what you do, if it applies to their business. Looking for case studies. You've moved along a little bit now. They're looking for some more kind of proof. They know that the way that your product or service is presented is probably right for them, but they're looking for some proof. And depending on who the visitor to the site is, they might need to take that away to, a decision maker as well. Existing customer, it's not always included. Obviously, a very common aim for any of our customers is to increase conversion on the site in the form of new leads and new inquiries. So not everybody necessarily uses these solutions to serve existing customers, but it is fairly common. It kind of just depends, obviously, on the product and service and the model that you have. But it's useful here to include something like this in a chatbot up front, because it also allows visitors to start categorizing themselves immediately. And so you don't end up with existing customers trying to kind of force through an inquiry via a booking request that is automatically routed to a salesperson who's then wasting their time. And then ask my own question. I've put this in here basically to show that we also have within the bot the AI chat capability. So before this, obviously before we had this capability built in, the bots were completely scripted, right? So what I would do in an onboarding project in the kickoff call is learn as much as I can about your business and about your goals, and then come up with questions, answers, options that we think are going to be engaging to your website visitors based on like their personas and the problems that they're trying to solve and so on and so forth. And then over time, we would assess the kind of granular level analytics within the bot to see what people are clicking on, what's catching their attention, what's working, what's not, and then optimize that over time. Now, that does still form a large part of what we do, and it works very effectively, especially if you are as a user of Leadoo, if you're very clued up on your website traffic already and you have detailed buyer personas, obviously that can really give us a lot of opportunity to put the right like curated content in front of them, even if when I say curated, even if it's just like the tone of voice and the terminology used, or maybe you have a fairly kind of complex service or product and you have different buyers, some of which are more technically minded, some are not, and you can really kind of customize the way the conversations go to help people. So that works really well. But what we also have is the possibility to include an AI chat. So this is powered by an LLM. We can connect to like a couple of the big ones. Typically it's powered by OpenAI, ChatGPT, but we can connect to others if we need to. And this just allows people to have a free-flowing conversation in the bot where they type their own messages. What we do is train a dedicated knowledge base on your website and any other content that you want to put in there, whichever knowledge base we need to use in order for the AI to answer these questions. And then we'll put in, obviously there's a tiny placeholder here for the prompt. We'll put in something much more comprehensive than this so that the AI knows that it is acting as an assistant on the website, what the goals are. We're trying to help people find the right information, answer sort of key questions, nudge them along to the point of getting in touch with a member of the team or booking a demo or getting started, whatever it may be. And we can also use this to create initial suggestions. So going back to what I was saying about coming up with things that are going to be engaging to the right visitors on the site, we can have initial suggestions in here to get that conversation started. And you can also enable dynamic suggestions, which is, if you've ever interacted with ChatGPT, you'll know that a lot of the messages end with some sort of question or suggestion of what it thinks you want it to do next. So we can kind of do that here as well, again, to try and keep that conversation going. So I'll leave that there for now and then just show a little bit more of the bot building. So if we drag from a connector and then let go, you'll see this node menu. You can also see this anywhere by right-clicking or opening it up on the side. So as the bot gets built out, it is a flowchart or a decision tree, goes out into different conversation branches. And each step is referred to as a node, and there are different node types, as you can see. Now, most of these are quite clear and self-explanatory. Bot says is just speech. So that is just like a message with no action, no other buttons. So you might use that first to say, great, I'll gather some details. I'll put you in touch. And then we can go on to some questions. So going back to the kind of benefit of gathering information in a conversational way rather than using static forms is that typically you can gather more information. So like I said, we know that kind of long static forms where you need lots of info can be daunting and can cause drop off anyway. But when it's conversational, we find that people are more likely to complete it because, at each point they're only being asked for one or two things. It's never kind of daunting, but also the conversation should be giving them value. It should feel personalized, right? So we're asking the right questions. So let's just say, for example, if we were talking about Leadoo, so with the bots, this is kind of something that is often included in a bot conversation, but maybe feels a little bit unnatural if you were imagining it in a kind of in-person conversation, which is that the bot will explain why it's asking questions, right? And this is where you kind of start to get to that personalization piece. Why are we asking questions? People can often feel kind of guarded, especially if you ask questions around maybe like budget, or you want to find out what their job title is, to essentially you might want to find out if they're a decision maker. These types of questions we do see very good completion on because they're positioned in such a way where people have had a good experience with a bot that has given them the information that they've needed. It's anticipated questions, either via the AI chat or through stuff that we have built together. And then it gets to a point and says, we need this information essentially so that we can come back to you with the most useful follow-up, whether that's a demo or a quote or whatever it may be. So it works quite well. So you can kind of build out a couple of questions here. This is a single choice node, which means that they can only select one answer. A multiple choice node allows them to select multiple. So you might say, please confirm which of our tools you're interested in. And then they can select multiple and continue the conversation. I won't build all of them out because obviously we would never actually ask 1,000 questions before trying to secure a lead. But from here, drop down is obviously fairly self-explanatory. They can only select one from a drop down, so you would use it over a single choice when there are lots of options, right? So for a single choice node, you might kind of want to have 4, 5, maybe 6 maximum before it starts to look a little bit messy. Whereas if you've got a longer drop down, it could be to do with their location. It could be like a longer list of services. It could be, where did you hear about us? And it might be quite a long list. You'd put that in a drop down. Open field allows them to type in their own message. So we'd use this for kind of additional comments and questions, or if you do need them to kind of free type something in. So if you just sort of said, please tell me a little bit about the project that you've got and where you think we could help, it allows them to type in a message. A carousel node is not exclusively, but it's primarily used by clients who have some sort of consumer product, essentially. So the carousel node is it sort of operates like a single choice, but it is a carousel. You can swipe through, you can have images. So it's kind of a fairly specific use case there for presenting products. Calendar node. I'll show you this one quickly because it can be used in 2 ways. It can be used as a date and time picker, which doesn't book anything, or it can be used as calendar booking, where we would actually connect it to, say, one of your salespeople's calendars, and people can book in a call there and then and really kind of secure a high quality lead. So what can be fairly common with clients who are using calendar bookings is some of these kind of earlier questions you might use to do a little bit of pre-qualification before sending the lead through. So if you had, for example, someone who had said that, their site traffic is over a certain amount, or their budget is over a certain amount, or it's a certain kind of key industry, you might later on route those ones into a calendar booking to get it booked in and secured. But anything else that isn't quite, your ideal customer profile, you might not necessarily route that to. So it just allows you to kind of start doing a bit of pre-qualification and routing leads right up front to make sure that everything's kind of efficient on your end. Then we have the collecting details I'll jump to, and then I'll come back to these making conclusions in a little bit. So collecting details is obviously very straightforward. Email, phone, name, country, company, location, and attachments is just asking for that one thing. But we do also have the option of form where you can customize it and put in multiple fields. So as much as gathering information in the conversational way can work well in comparison to a static form, we wouldn't typically break it down to one at a time unless you were gathering a very small amount of information. Say it was like a newsletter sign up. You might ask for, just email first, and then you might say, thanks, could you please pop your name in here so we know who to address the emails to. But if you're gathering a bit more information, if this is a kind of solid lead, you wouldn't go through step by step. What's your first name? What's your last name? Because that can cause drop off, right? If it becomes sort of too broken down. So the form nodes can work quite nicely to gather the information in a slightly more staggered way. So you might kind of ask for name and company name, and then go on to a form node that gathers the contact details, right? From here, or what I should say is the important thing to point out now is that the kind of order of questions and the order of, the order of priority that you gather information in is obviously very important. You don't want to ask too much up front that you risk a drop off, or you don't want to, you might not ask questions up front, say like a budget question, which could be a little bit touchy. People might not be willing to give that information up straight away. So this is just an important thing to bear in mind as well. If you are ever building your own bots, the kind of default for what we would say is this is a lead, the criteria for a lead is phone or email, right? You can change the default in the system in terms of like how it might trigger integrations and automations. But at the end of the day, everyone is going to need at least one piece of contact details for it to be a lead, right? So that criteria is kind of true regardless. So what you can do with questions here is obviously secure the lead up front, secure it quite early, maybe a couple of, kind of useful questions here to support that kind of personalized experience, and then secure the lead. And then from here, then you might start to ask things that might seem a little bit more odd to some visitors, but as long as they're not mandatory information for you and it's a bit more nice to have to kind of enrich the lead, then there's no risk of losing it now because they've given their details here and the lead is secured. So now you might say, thanks, first name. So you see here, you can use information that has been inputted as well to keep that conversation nice and friendly. So they've given us their name and their company name. So we can just use that back to them now and say, thank you, Gwen. What is your role at Flume? I know you're not specifically at Flume, but So this is quite nice as well for personalizing that conversation. And as I say, this is not going to impact the possibility of securing that lead because they're only going to see this once they've given their contact details. And what we can also do with open fields is we can read the information that they write in. So in the same way that we can use their first name and their company name, we can actually create our own variables as well. And then read them here. So this is particularly useful when it comes to setting up integrations, because if you had, a job role field in your CRM that you need populated every time there's a lead, then we're going to be able to take the free text from there, save it as an individual piece of data and send it through. That's really the kind of main purpose of this particular use. But it does also mean that when you see lead emails from Leadoo, certain pieces of information are kind of more gathered in the top to be useful at a glance for you. Right, next, making conclusions. So the logic router and the advanced logic router are fairly similar. And for the most part, I only really use the advanced logic router. A logic router allows you to split the conversation based on a given score. So you may or may not have noticed, but in a previous node, say on a single choice node, we can apply variable scores and labels to individual answers. So if we were using a scoring system within the bot just to route the conversation, then we would use the logic router, set the range, and you can obviously add multiple conditions and route the conversation out differently. So as an example, this might be how we route people to the calendar booking versus not, based on pre-qualification that we've done earlier in the call. The same can be achieved with labels, which is why I tend to use advanced logic routers more than logic routers, because the labels have a kind of dual purpose. So instead of putting like scores on these answers, which are kind of only really used for conversation routing, we can send through the score in via an integration, but it's a little bit, everyone might have different scoring systems is the point, so it can be a bit more tricky. Whereas with labels, you could put in here a dedicated label group and put in fixed values. And then that's going to serve two purposes. We can now use these labels in the bot to route conversations, but we can also use those labels to send it through to the CRM. So again, in this scenario, if in your CRM you have a dedicated field for the website traffic, we can send this through. We can make sure that the label value matches what the CRM is expecting. and make sure we're populating all of the necessary lead information. It's not just the bare bones. Especially as obviously many companies will use these pieces of information to trigger automations and workflows at their own end. So we need to make sure that we kind of meet that same standard when sending through the leads. So in an advanced logic router, what I could do now is put in essentially like a kind of like a Boolean search equation to say that if this label exists after this point, we're going to send them somewhere else. And then to stick with the same example, if they've selected any of the other answers that has indicated sort of higher traffic, we might then send them off into a calendar booking to get that lead well and truly secured. Any questions on that? No? Cool. What you can also do with this, whenever you add a condition, you can actually see like there's lots of options for inputs and lots of options for operations. So if you were using like truly variable information like numbers, like free typed numbers, you could put rules in that are kind of like more than, less than, etc., etc. There's quite a lot of options here. And you can also use it to keep conversations tidy. So if you have quite a big complex bot, you might have scenarios where somebody has perhaps signed up to a newsletter, they've already given their email address. But we've been able to keep the conversation going by saying, is there anything else you want help with? They've gone a bit further into the conversation, and now they actually want to book a call, book a demo, speak to a salesperson. So instead of asking for their email address again, we could, at the beginning of this conversation branch, have an advanced logic router that checks to see if the email address already exists in this conversation. And then if it does, we can put them down a more kind of customized conversation pathway that's not going to ask them to repeat themselves. So that's just like another example used there, just to kind of keep the conversations very tidy. And then what's left in making conclusions, you've got calculator. So this can be used for sort of like simple, maybe quote builders or ROI calculators, where we can have a combination of freely entered numeric values from the end user. We can also create fixed numeric values and use that to create an equation that gives an output or multiple outputs. And then the lookup query, this basically allows us to query a table of information which we can save into the backend. So the lookup query and the API call are kind of like more advanced features. They're not used quite as commonly. The lookup could be, well, as an example, actually, one that I've built for a client recently, they have lots of different downloadable assets across various pages on the site, and they wanted to incorporate that into the bots. And so instead of building loads of separate bots that all have like a unique asset download link in it, we put those links into a sheet with the website URLs. And then when the bot is interacted with, it's going to read the URL and use a lookup query to return the correct link, which we can then offer as a download button. So that's just one example of how you might use that to kind of just keep allow yourself to have like one bot that can work dynamically across multiple pages. I would say, to put it as broadly as possible, that's typically what you would use a lookup query for. And then the API call is exactly that, and therefore it can be very custom. So an example that I've been working on recently would be like an order status check. So someone pops in their order number, we send that through to the API, and then it comes back with the latest status. So again, a more advanced feature, because that's just going to have to be kind of like scoped out and explored at each time to see what's possible, depending on each of the different APIs that it could be connecting with. And then lastly, bot rating and live chat. So bot rating is just something that you can put in right at the very end that asks the visitor to rate their experience and leave any feedback. So obviously that's just completely optional. And then you'll be able to see the bot rating at a glance within the bot list view, which was the page before this one. And then live chat is obviously nice and self-explanatory. If you have team members at your end who are available and want to speak to customers live on the site, then we can incorporate live chat as well. And the good thing about this is it can be built in kind of seamlessly. So let's just say, for argument's sake, let's just say if we weren't using AI, what we might do here, if someone says, ask my own question, you could route into live chat, and then you could follow it up in the same branch with an open field box, and then go into contact details. Now, the reason that we would do this is if you're using live chat but nobody's online, it will just bypass this and go straight to this next step. So it's quite nice because you can hide it. You don't have to set the expectation that someone is going to sort of click on speak to a human. You can, obviously, if you know that you're going to have people online, you know, the vast majority of times, or you might put the working hours in there to make it clear. But it can work quite nicely how it just sort of sits hidden within the bot. That when someone wants to speak to someone or ask their own question, as long as you've got people online, they'll have live chat as an option. If you don't, then it bypasses it, and there's been no kind of expectation set followed by a potential disappointment. They just go in sort of none the wiser to the inquiry pathway. Any questions on anything I've covered? Obviously, I've kind of rattled through, but hopefully if anyone needs to, you know, pick out anything here, they can kind of refer back to the recording and pause and see. But does anyone have any questions about anything I've shown, or if you're wondering if the bots have any certain capabilities that you've got in mind?
My only question might be a bit specific, I don't know, but we use a round robin HubSpot calendar for people to book a meeting. Your calendar function, could that link into a HubSpot calendar that has multiple people? It does have multiple people, doesn't it, Nikki? Yeah.
It can't at the moment, no. So the calendar tool that we have can connect to Google Workspace and then Microsoft Workspaces, so either Outlook or 365. So no, it can't connect to HubSpot calendars. But within the kind of limitations of being able to connect to Google Workspaces and Microsoft Workspaces, we can have multiple calendars. So it's not exactly a round robin, but if you had like one calendar node with multiple calendars, then it gives the end user the option, obviously, to explore different availabilities. Or if they're not looking to select someone, because obviously, like they might not necessarily need to pick a particular person. Then it assigns it randomly, which obviously over time then balances out.
Lovely, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions at all?
I've only got a quick one, in terms we've only just went live last week on this, and we haven't built any of our bots. So you guys have built up all of our bots. Will you help us with this if we do want to create a bot? And then in terms of the customer service side of it, will you then give us ideas about how we can improve the bots that we've got at the moment using the stats that come through?
Yeah, so let me answer your question in reverse order. Absolutely. That's a large part of what happens with your account manager and technical account manager, is to look at the performance of the bots, assess what's working, what's not, and help you to kind of double down on what is working. In terms of supporting you to build more bots, it might depend on like the kind of subscription level that you've got. So onboarding is kind of contained by saying like, we'll build the first X amount of bots for you, but you probably don't have a limit on the amount of bots you can have. When it comes to building your own or us building them, like I said, it would kind of depend on the subscription level and then the scope of it, right? If you needed several completely new bots, then it might be like a sort of one-off cost for us to build them. If you don't have the time to do it. But the thing that I would stress is that once you have a bot solution, so obviously in your position, you've just recently finished onboarding, it's very easy to build more bots because you can copy and paste from one builder to the next, right? So now that you've got the kind of the main structure of all of your key bots and presumably like a global chat bot, and then the branches where people are converting and getting in touch, they can be copied and pasted into other bots, even from this view. Let's just delete this. From this view, you can duplicate bots and then just make minor changes. So it is really quite straightforward to get more of your own up and running if you need to. Of course, if you have questions, like, always reach out to us and we're going to help. But yeah, like for additional bot builds, it's kind of just scoped as you go.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. And then the only thing I didn't really get onto, but I'm not going to because we need to give Gavin a chance to speak, is the style settings. So within the settings of any bot, you can come in here and customize the style, colors, fonts, font sizes, the kind of shapes that the buttons have, etc., to make sure that it fits in with the branding on your website. Everything here is fairly straightforward and self-explanatory. And if you hover over any part of the preview on the right and click it, it's going to tell you where to go to edit that. Cool. Over to you, Gav. I'm sorry I haven't left you that much time.
That's all right. That's fine. I'll be quick. And that's actually a good transition in terms of like what I'll be speaking about and what we do in the CS teams. Let me share my screen. So if we start at the bot insight, so I mean, as Ryan sort of lives in this sort of conversion kit area in terms of the building, and then whenever the solutions hand over to CS, then we're much more focused in the conversion insights. We'll obviously be in the kit to make changes and help, and in fact, if we're the ones that make the suggestions for optimizations, if we say like, oh, I think you should change the trigger settings to this, or you should change the pathway to be more conversational, or whatever. If we're suggesting those changes, then it'll be us to make the changes, which is slightly different than if you're coming to us with scope for new bots, we could obviously discuss that. But if our job in those optimization calls is to review this data with you, tell you where things are going well, tell you things are maybe not going so well, and then come up with ideas to fix those, and then we'll be the ones to help implement those. So what I wanted just to show now is, so this is the bot insights area, what we typically look out for in terms of sort of red flags or things that are going well, and what are the key metrics that we'll be looking after. And actually recently we've had quite a nice update in the platform that we've got a little sort of percentage increase and decrease beside each of the metrics, so we can see very clearly, like, this is set to the last 30 days. So if we look at the comparison between this and then the 30 days previous, it's very easy now to see exactly what's going well and what's not going so well. So this is our own Leadoo backend. Some of these numbers are a wee bit crazy because we've been doing a lot of recruiting recently, so that'll drive the leads up because they're easier leads to get, if you like. But on this screen, what we'll be mostly focusing on is these metrics here. So conversion rate from discussions, conversion rate from triggers, and engagement rate. So just in case anyone's unfamiliar, the engagement rate is how many people actually click one of the bots once it loads on the screen. So the trigger is the bot has loaded, like Ryan showed earlier, and then whenever he clicked on one of those options, that would count as a discussion or as an engagement rate. And so that's basically how many people are in the bot starting conversations. And so if we notice that this is down, key ways we might want to think about changing that is, maybe we change the avatars to be be a human versus like a little icon. Maybe we change the color, we change the starting message to be more sort of action focused rather than feature focused, or maybe sort of persona based or asking about industry and things like that. Really just to try those different sort of ways to get people to act, start the conversation with the bots. And whenever we're doing those, we'll be doing sort of A/B testing, so we can run two different versions of the same bot side by side if we want to try different things. And so we can see sort of very clearly here, if we did make one of those changes, like say, for example, we added more FAQs to one of the in-page bots, we could see very clearly, did that have a positive or negative impact over the past 30 days whenever we tried that test, for example. So it's nice and easy to see the results, and any suggestions that we'd be making or any reviews or notes we'd be giving you would all be based on the data in here and sort of our own knowledge, over the time we've been working here, and using things like the conversion crunch, where we can get an idea of what we would expect for certain industries and things like that. So that's the sort of engagement piece, which is sort of depending on the starting points, and obviously depending on a bit of traffic, like, what are the, like, who are the people that are actually visiting the site. And then the next sort of area we'd look at would be the conversion rate. So there's two different types of conversion rate. So from triggers is how many people actually convert from seeing the bot, And then from discussion, which is how many people convert once they're actually inside the pathways. So this one is probably more pertinent because this tells us about the inner workings of the bot. So good example that Ryan was showing there, where he's shown the sort of more conversational way of gathering bits of information. So we'll be able to see, very clearly if that approach is working for your particular use case. And I mean, obviously it might be the case that maybe you need to ask things in a longer form for integration reasons. Maybe you have to have certain information for leads to be created and that sort of stuff, which is completely fine. But we'll be able to see very clearly if those are working. And I'll jump into one of the bots now to show you how we can look at that and a wee bit more information. But I suppose those are the sort of key metrics we'd be focusing on, is how many people are starting the conversations and then how many people are basically completing them. And then from there, what we'd want to do is we'd sort of highlight any areas that maybe would maybe like particular bots that wouldn't be performing so well. Sorry, so before that, I'll just jump back 2 seconds. So this table shows us the different types of bots, so chat bots, in-page visual bots, etc. And if we scroll down to the bottom of this, we'll be able to sort of divide those into the particular bots themselves, because at the top is just like the selection of bots. Whereas now we can go, well, actually, let's focus on the chat bots. So let's focus on the in-page bots to see which ones were performing sort of poorly or really well. And then we can maybe sort of take the learnings from the good ones and try and improve the sort of more poor ones that are working from there. And then, so again, it's exactly the same table as above. It's just this one is now bot specific over a certain period of time. So if we were making changes to particular bots, maybe we changed the form, maybe we changed from Ryan's face to my face to see which one people like better, like things like that. Wherever we're testing, we'd be able to see if that engagement rate has gone up, has gone down. If we've changed the form to be more conversational, or we've added a few more discovery questions before, like industry, website traffic, budget, things like that, we'd be able to see, well, are people going through and converting through that conversation on that particular bot. And then from there, if we did notice that one was performing particularly poorly, we can jump in to the actual bot itself. So as Ryan was showing, he had that one built. If I just zoom out, this one is a little bit more advanced than that, but obviously he was just doing the demo. And again, once you get these bots set up, as Ryan was saying, you can just copy this whole section, or you can duplicate the whole bot and go over there. So while there is a lot of sort of nodes in here, it's not as complex as it looks. It maybe it's just, obviously there's a lot in it. What we would then tend to do would be turn on the optimization and analytics options at the top. And what that does, as you can see, is turn this into sort of like a traffic light system where we can sort of color code where the drop off is and where the bottlenecks are, to sort of see, well, are people going through the conversations? Are they hitting a certain point and they're stopping? Are we asking too many questions? Are we not asking the right questions based on the traffic that's coming to the site, for example? And if I just zoom in, what you'll get is a breakdown of, well, how many times has it actually been triggered and how many times has it actually been clicked on? And then, well, which of those answers are getting the most attention? So this is our homepage chatbot. And then, so if we looked at this, we can see most of the people who interact with us are saying they want to know more about Leadoo. So they're using it as a sort of self-serve education piece to sort of find out, are our products right for them? Do they do the same things that maybe some of the competitors are doing? Obviously, they're sort of shopping around, sort of getting an idea what solution would be right for them. And then, we can sort of ask these discovery questions. Well, what do you want to use the solution for? And by answering that, then we can sort of funnel them down different pathways to get them to either sort of the right sales rep, or to give them the right piece of information, or to gather more information then based on that. So if we looked at lead gen, which has no surprise is the most common one, everyone wants more leads, right? So we will go and follow this through, and just as you can see, if I click on one of these, it'll sort of show us where it's going. We can also turn on the visual flow. Just sort of, if you do get a bit lost, if you just came into a solution and it is quite large, there are sort of little tips you can see for sort of navigation. So again, we can sort of just follow this through, and we can get to the next node, so we can see, well, is there more drop off? How are people calling through? So we've given them a bit of information here, which is, you come to the right place. We help around 1,000 customers globally generate more leads. And then the question will be, well, what do you want to do now? I'm here to help you. The bot is sort of positioning itself as, I'm here to help you get more familiar with the platform. Do you want to find out a little bit more about one of our 3 sort of pillars, which is the conversion kit, the conversion insights, or the conversion experts? Or are you, have you seen enough? Are you ready to book a demo? But obviously not everyone is just going to go straight for that. So we need to keep nurturing them through. And by clicking on the conversion kit, we can follow this through, give them a little bit more information about the tools that we use. And then again, steering them back towards a call to action, which is, are you ready to book a demo? Do you want to find out about what pricing? Do you have a question for us that we didn't answer in that particular bot flow? And then again, just following this all the way through to see where is the drop off. Now that we're into the sort of form nodes where we're trying to gather that data, how many people are leaving their email, how many people are not. There's a bit of a drop off here, but once they've given us their email address, those sort of extra discovery questions, we can see they're very happy to leave those once they've committed. So in this case, there's probably a little bit more work we need to do to give them a bit more value before they give us their email. That's what that would tell me, is that not enough people are leaving this because maybe there's not enough value provided at this point. So maybe offering sort of downloadable content, often like a guide about our services, maybe like a brochure, like a pricing guide, things like that might help, or lean towards sort of case studies to sort of position us as experts in the field. But as you can see, once they've actually completed that, we can follow it through, and the drop off is very little from there. So we can see that as a sort of using it as like a discovery call piece, like where are they based and things like that. So that's really the insights. I'll jump into the website analytics in 2 seconds because we've still got a wee bit of time. I know we're sort of pushing on now, but I hope that makes sense in terms of what you should be looking for whenever especially when you've just been handed over from onboarding and you're starting to get data in and you're wondering, well, there's a lot of information in here. What should I be looking out for? So I suppose just to sort of recap, engagement rate and conversion rate from discussion are the 2 key things. And then once you're actually in the bots, just to get a really good understanding of, well, what are people clicking on, because it'll help you identify the traffic. Are you getting a lot of existing customers to the site? Are you getting people who are just browsing? What are people doing on the site? And we can help you identify those. And as Ryan showed earlier with like the labels and variables, we can help report on that information based on what people have clicked on. So we can help sort of identify what people are looking for and sort of who they are. And so I'll just jump onto the website analytics just quickly. Unless there's any questions, I'll load this up, see if anyone has any questions in the meantime. Because we saw this a bit on the home screen in terms of sort of like the pages that are most converting. But if there are any sort of glaring pages that are maybe getting lots of traffic but not converting so well, this is a great place to look for these. So maybe some of you are already using like Google Analytics for this information, which is fine. Some of our clients prefer this because it's basically like a 1-page version of Google Analytics. So it's much more streamlined. It's a lot less confusing. There's a lot less tabs to click through. And it's more or less the same information you would get there. So the page views, returning visitors, how long people are spending on the site, what pages are getting the most traffic. So again, you could see, well, the pricing pages had almost 800 views, but we've not had any conversions in the past month. So there's something not quite right there from our point of view. So that would be something that we'd be able to look into. And so there's maybe sort of an opportunity to get some sort of quick wins here by maybe adding different bots, more personalized bots around that experience on those particular pages. And of course, your traffic will change over time. So the pages that were most popular when you're in onboarding might not be that's the sort of same case in 6 months. So it's always good to sort of keep track on those pages. And then we'll see sort of where they're coming from in terms of if you're spending money on ads, or if people are coming direct. And if we scroll down to the very bottom, we've got campaigns, which is if you're running digital ads and you're using UTMs around sort of campaigns, you'll be able to identify, well, has that money we spent in Google this month, has it sort of generated X amount of leads? We've been running a chatbot campaign, so we can see, we can tie that together with the ROI. So we can say, oh, well, we spent 3,000, for example, in Google last month on this campaign, and it's generated 22 conversions. And then we can track that all the way through to say, well, how many of those actually became customers? so we know whether that campaign was worthwhile or not. So this is a really good screen to sort of look at to see where your traffic is coming from and sort of what they're doing on the site. And just briefly before we run out of time, because we touched on this slightly, now you couldn't show this because you're in the demo platform, but this is the company ID side of it. So this is really useful for B2B businesses, especially on that outbound piece that Ryan mentioned, is that for all those people who come to the site and interact with the bots and interact with your website, you know, obviously they're not all going to convert. It would be great if they did, but for the ones who don't, we can still help you identify, well, are your target persona coming to the site and what are they doing on the site? So we'll give you a breakdown of what that traffic is, like the industry distribution, what's the revenue count, etc. And the key difference for us here, as opposed to sort of competitors who do similar things, is that we've got this bot discussions tab. So again, asking those discovery questions, asking it in that sort of conversational tone, we'll be able to see, well, who's coming to the site? Are they your ICP, and have they started conversations? And if they already have, then we can get an idea, well, what were they looking at on the site? What did they have a conversation about? And then can we use that as sort of ammunition to sort of go after them on LinkedIn, or, you know, chase up with them. Maybe they're already in the pipeline and they've said, oh, we're not ready to convert yet, come back in 6 months. But they've come back within sort of a couple of weeks and they've looked at the pricing page and they've clicked a few options. So really sort of actionable information here. And the sort of key for this one is that as soon as you're in onboarding, this can go live even without the bots being live. So this is as soon as the tracking script is on the site, on your website, this information is there. So you can start to generate those outbound opportunities even before the bots go live. So you can sort of be reviewing that as you go. And we are 12:01, so I will stop talking now, unless anyone has any particular questions.
I had a question about the tracking. I'm assuming your tracking is the same as analytics tracking, etc. So where we've got cookie policy on, people can say no, and then they wouldn't be trackable. Fine. Okay, good. So just basically the same. If they say yes to cookies, we're golden. If they don't, they fall in our pot of unknown.
Well, I mean, it depends. If you want, that's completely up to you. So we can have, this is what's frozen here. We can set it so that we will track them regardless whether they accept cookies or not, or whether they, or if you want to track them specifically if they have accepted cookies. But that is a setting that you would have, you'd have full control of over within the site. Okay. And obviously it's just going a bit haywire here. Yeah. So, you know, there's a few different settings we can have in place. So we've got like always, which is track regardless. Yeah, we can tie it to the cookie policy, etc. We've got clients who sort of do it differently, but the option's there regardless.
Okay, cool. Good to know.
Great. Okay. Any other questions?
No, good. Thank you.